They told you that being alone was a punishment. They lied. What if the very thing you have been running from, the isolation, the empty rooms, the silence that follows you like a shadow, is not your curse but your forge? What if loneliness is not a wound that needs healing, but a weapon you were never trained to use? Niccolò Machiavelli watched men rise and fall for many years in Renaissance Italy. He studied princes who commanded armies and merchants who built empires, and he noticed something that almost nobody speaks about. The men who kept power the longest were not the ones surrounded by friends and supporters. They were the ones who understood how to be alone without being broken by it. There is a reason society wants you connected to the hive. There is a reason you are told that isolation is dangerous, that you need community, that you need validation, that you must belong. Because a person who can stand alone cannot be easily controlled. Today, I am going to show you what Niccolò Machiavelli, Arthur Schopenhauer, and Friedrich Nietzsche understood about solitude. Truths so uncomfortable they have been buried under centuries of social conditioning. You will learn why the crowd fears the individual who walks alone. You will understand the strategic design of isolation, and by the end you will see your loneliness not as a weakness, but as an advantage so powerful that most people will never be mentally prepared to access it. But this knowledge has a price. Once you understand what I am about to reveal, you cannot return to the comfortable lie that connection is always good and solitude is always bad. Let us begin. In Law 18 of the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene presents one of the most misunderstood principles ever written. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. On the surface, this seems to oppose everything I just said, but look deeper. Greene is not warning against solitude. He is warning against fear-based isolation, the fortress built from weakness, not strength. There is a difference that separates rulers from cowards. Strategic withdrawal versus frightened escape. When a prince builds walls because he fears his enemies, those walls become his prison. History is filled with examples. Louis XVI retreated into Palace of Versailles while France starved. He surrounded himself with sycophants. He cut himself off from the reality of his kingdom. And when the crowd finally came, those golden walls could not protect him. But there is another kind of isolation, the kind practiced by Marcus Aurelius, who wrote Meditations alone in a military tent, surrounded by war and death. The kind practiced by Niccolò Machiavelli himself, who wrote The Prince in exile, banished from Florence, tortured by the Medici family, stripped of everything he built. He was not hiding from the world. He was refining everything he knew into a weapon. Machiavelli wrote from isolation, but not from fear. He wrote from anger, from clarity, from a place where he had nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to distort his vision. That is the difference. The weak man builds a fortress to escape the world. The strong man builds a laboratory to study it. Ask yourself, which one are you building? You have been conditioned since childhood to fear aloneness. Think about it. Every children's story punishes the loner. The wolf is alone and therefore evil. The sheep that leaves the flock gets eaten. The hero is always surrounded by companions, allies, a fellowship. Isolation is shown as the fate of villains and broken people. This is not random. Societies function on compliance. Economies run on consumption. Both require you to care deeply about what others think. Both require you to chase external approval. Both require you to fear standing outside the group. If you are comfortable alone, you stop buying things to impress people. You stop performing for applause. You stop being a useful part in the machine of endless comparison and endless consumption. Arthur Schopenhauer saw through this long ago. He wrote that the person who truly enjoys solitude possesses something rare, a self that is enough for itself. but society cannot allow that easily. A self-sufficient individual is an economic problem, an emotional exception, a threat to the system of manufactured need that keeps people always craving what others provide. So they label you. They call it social anxiety. They call it attachment problems. They call it avoidant personality. They create clinical terms for what might simply be a mind that does not require constant noise from the herd. I am not denying real psychological pain, but I am asking you to question whether some of your loneliness is true suffering or socially created shame. The question is not why am I alone? The question is who benefits when I believe being alone is wrong. Here is what the strategists understood that most people never will. Solitude is the birthplace of original thought. Friedrich Nietzsche climbed into the Swiss Alps alone. He walked for hours in silence, his mind exploding with ideas that would reshape philosophy. Thus, Spoke Zarathustra was not written in a crowded salon surrounded by intellectuals. It was written in isolation so deep that most people would have fallen into despair. But Nietzsche did not fall. He rose. He wrote that the higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. This is not pride. It is observation. When you begin to think independent thoughts, thoughts not borrowed from the group, not approved by consensus, you become invisible to those who can only see through collective eyes, and this is your strength. When you spend time alone, truly alone without the constant distraction of screens and noise, something starts to shift. Your mind stops repeating the opinions of others. Your thoughts stop being automatic reactions to social pressure. You begin to hear your own voice, maybe for the first time since you were a child. In his study of creative minds, Anthony Storr observed this pattern again and again. Isaac Newton alone during quarantine developing calculus. Charles Darwin alone on his estate for years shaping the theory of evolution. Franz Kafka alone in his room at night producing stories that would define the 20th century. They did not create in spite of solitude. They created because of it. The crowd produces nothing original. The crowd consumes. The crowd reacts. The crowd copies and repeats until every sharp idea becomes dull. Creation is a solitary act. If you are alone right now, you are standing before a blank canvas. The question is whether you will use it or keep mourning the absence of an audience that would only distract you. Machiavelli observed a certain type of prince who always failed, the one who depended on too many allies. A ruler who cannot stand alone becomes a hostage to those he depends on. His alliances are not choices, they are needs, and everyone around him can sense it. When people feel that you need them, something changes. They start to push limits. They begin to test you. They treat you as replaceable because they know you cannot walk away. This applies to friendships, romantic relationships, and business deals. The person who is afraid of being alone will accept disrespect they should never tolerate. They will stay in toxic relationships. They will keep friends who quietly dislike them. They will agree to bad terms, laugh at jokes that insult them, and twist their identity to fit whoever is in front of them. All because the alternative, being alone, feels unbearable. But here is the truth that sets you free. The ability to be alone is the base of every strong relationship. When you can walk away, when you truly do not need someone, your connections change. You stop negotiating from fear. You stop accepting leftovers. You start relating from wholeness instead of desperation. In Party of One, Annalie Rufus explains how people comfortable in solitude often attract deeper relationships because they are not chasing. They are not pretending, they are simply present, and presence draws people in. The desperate person pushes others away. The self-contained person pulls them closer. This is not manipulation, it is natural law. Neediness repels, self-sufficiency attracts. Now let us speak about strategy. There is a method that Machiavelli would have respected, one that very few understand, and even fewer can practice. It is called strategic retreat. When you feel yourself losing ground in any area, social, professional, romantic, the average person pushes harder, they chase more, they talk more, they try to prove themselves, and they watch their position weaken with every desperate move. The Machiavellian does the opposite. They withdraw. Not with anger, not with drama, not with announcements meant to trigger reaction. They simply become less available, less visible, less eager. In 1512, when Machiavelli was removed from his position and sent away to his farm, he did not beg the Medici family for forgiveness. He did not flood them with desperate messages. He stepped back, he studied, he wrote, and the prince, born from that exile, would outlive all his political enemies. When you retreat with purpose, several things happen. First, you reclaim your focus. The energy you were wasting on people who did not value you returns to you. That alone can change your life. Second, you gain perspective. When you are too close to people, you cannot see them clearly. Distance gives clarity that closeness hides. Third, you activate something ancient in human nature. People value what becomes rare. When you withdraw calmly, without hostility or explanation, others are forced to recognize what they may have taken for granted. But this only works if your retreat is real. If you are secretly checking your phone, waiting for their message, you are not retreating. You are pretending while still emotionally attached. True strategic retreat requires inner detachment. You must redirect your energy to your own work, your own improvement, your own mission. You must become so focused on your growth that their absence becomes background noise. Arthur Schopenhauer was brutally honest about human nature. He observed that much of what we call social connection is actually distraction from ourselves. He believed a person's worth can be measured by how much they enjoy their own company. Those who cannot tolerate solitude are often escaping something within. No amount of social activity can fill that gap. It can only temporarily cover it. This is why some people panic when forced into isolation. They never built an inner world. Their identity depends completely on outside feedback. Remove the feedback, and they feel lost. But those who have practiced solitude, who have sat alone with their thoughts and survived, gain something powerful. They develop a self that is not dependent on witnesses. They form an identity that stands even when nobody is watching. Schopenhauer called this intellectual richness. The ability to be entertained by your own thoughts. The power to find depth within your own mind without constant stimulation. This is not pride. It is independence, and it frightens those who do not have it. The crowd dislikes the individual who walks alone, not because you threaten them physically, but because you threaten their worldview. Your solitude is a quiet accusation. Every moment you are content by yourself exposes their constant need for validation. Every time you skip the gossip, avoid the noise, refuse to chase approval, you reveal another way to live. So they will mock you. They will label you strange, antisocial, too serious, no fun. Let them. Nietzsche warned about herd mentality, the way the masses enforce conformity through social pressure rather than laws. But the herd only controls those who still crave belonging. The moment you release that craving, their influence fades. In Quiet, Susan Cain explains how introverts have often been undervalued in Western culture. The outgoing, loud, attention-seeking personality has been treated as the ideal. Meanwhile, the thoughtful, reserved, solitary type has been treated as flawed. This is cultural bias, not truth. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came from people working alone. Albert Einstein developed relativity while working quietly in a patent office. Solitude did not weaken him. It sharpened him. And it can sharpen you too if you stop seeing it as a punishment and start seeing it as power. Wittgenstein withdrew to a small cabin in Norway. Emily Dickinson hardly stepped outside her room and created poetry, that would outlive empires. The crowd creates noise. The individual creates legacy. Decide which one you want to become. Now we reach the central method, what I call transmutation. This is the alchemical act of turning the heavy weight of loneliness into the gold of sovereignty. Most people never finish this change because they stay busy numbing their solitude with cheap distractions. They scroll, they swipe, they dull their senses. They pack every quiet second with sound because they are afraid to face what silence holds. But you are still here, which means you might be ready. The first stage of transmutation is acknowledgement. You must stop labeling your loneliness as something wrong. Stop treating it like a problem to fix or a sickness to cure. Your solitude is not a symptom. It is raw material. Every hour you spend alone is an hour untouched by the opinions, expectations, and projections of others. This is extremely rare. Most people live their whole lives without ever experiencing a single day of real psychological independence. Their thoughts are borrowed. Their tastes are shaped by trends. Their identity is a mixture of influences they never questioned. But you, in your isolation, have access to something they do not, a direct relationship with your own mind. The second stage is excavation. In solitude, without the distraction of social performance, you start to meet parts of yourself you have been avoiding, fears you pushed down, desires you denied, shadows you acted like did not exist. This is where most people run back to noise. The digging is painful. You uncover things inside yourself that you do not want to see. But Machiavelli understood that a leader who does not know his own weaknesses will be destroyed by them. Self-knowledge is not optional. It is a strategic requirement. And self-knowledge is available only to those willing to sit in the dark long enough to see what is actually there. The third stage is integration. You take what you discover, the fears, the wounds, the embarrassing desires, the unspoken anger, and you make it part of your conscious identity. You stop pretending you're only light. You accept the darkness and therefore gain control over it. Carl Jung called this shadow work, but Machiavelli was practicing it centuries before psychology gave it a label. He accepted the ruthless parts of human nature that polite society prefers to ignore, and because he accepted them, he could use them instead of being ruled by them. The fourth stage is construction. After clearing away the debris of conditioning, after digging and integrating your hidden self, you now possess something most people never gain: a foundation. From this base, you can build intentionally, not according to social pressure, not according to peer approval, not according to what gets applause. You build based on your own design. This is what it means to become sovereign. A sovereign is not someone who controls others. A sovereign is someone who governs themselves. Their kingdom is internal. Their throne is psychological. And no outside situation can truly remove them from it, because their power does not depend on outside conditions. This is what your solitude can offer you if you are willing to accept it. Let me show you this transformation in history. In 1302, Dante Alighieri was exiled from Florence, banished under threat of death if he ever returned. He lost his political role, his property, his home. He wandered through Italy for the rest of his life, never seeing his city again. Most men would have collapsed under that loss, but Dante took his exile and turned it into something eternal. The Divine Comedy, one of the greatest literary works ever written, was created during that wandering isolation. The journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise was not only symbolism, it was personal. A man who had lost everything descending into his own darkness and rising transformed. Dante's exile was not only punishment, it was freedom. Had he stayed in Florence, caught in politics and social games, he might have died as a minor official remembered by no one. His exile freed him from distractions that would have drained his genius. Think also of Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero. When Nero turned against him and forced him into exile on Corsica, Seneca did not panic. He wrote letters and philosophical works that would shape thought for 2,000 years. In one letter on solitude, Seneca wrote about setting aside days to live with the simplest food and rough clothing, asking himself, "Is this what I feared?" He was not frightened by isolation. He practiced it on purpose because he understood that dependence on outside conditions, whether social, material, or emotional, was the real prison. One more example. In 1845, Henry David Thoreau withdrew to a cabin at Walden Pond. He lived alone for 2 years, deliberately simplifying his life to discover what was truly essential. What came from that solitude was more than a book. It was a philosophy of resistance. Walden taught generations that the life of quiet desperation lived by many men was not required, that you could step outside the system. That solitude was not exile. It was freedom. Thoreau wrote that he never found a companion as companionable as solitude. These men were not broken by their isolation. They were shaped by it. Now let us speak in practical terms. How do you use your solitude as strength? First, create productive rituals. The danger of unstructured isolation is endless overthinking, the same dark ideas repeating without solution. That is destructive solitude. Productive solitude needs structure, daily rituals that guide your alone time into creation, writing, exercise, building, learning. Machiavelli in exile had a ritual. He worked on his farm during the day. In the evening, he changed into formal clothes, the garments he once wore in office, and entered his study. There he read and wrote as if he were still among leaders. This ritual protected his identity as a thinker and strategist even when life tried to reduce him to a farmer. Your rituals serve the same purpose. They protect your identity as someone building towards something bigger, even when nobody is watching. Second, build intellectual companionship. You may be alone physically, but you do not have to be alone mentally. Books are conversations with the greatest minds in history. When you read Machiavelli, Marcus Aurelius, Schopenhauer, you enter dialogue with thinkers who understood struggle, isolation, and power. This is not a replacement for human contact. It is a different type of connection, one that crosses time and cannot be taken from you. Choose your library carefully. Select writers who challenge your thinking. Engage with ideas that make you reflect instead of just consume. Third, produce proof of your growth. The danger of solitude is losing awareness of progress. Without outside feedback, you may feel stuck even while improving. Fight this by creating evidence. Write every day. Track your workouts. Record your development. Keep a record you can review and see clearly that you are moving forward. This proof has another function. When you eventually step back into social spaces, and you will have results from your time in the shadows. Not excuses, not explanations. Evidence. Fourth, practice strategic return. Solitude is a season, not a life sentence. The monk who climbs the mountain eventually walks back down. When you return, do it with intention, not desperation. Offer value, perspective, skill, clarity. People will notice something different in you. They will sense depth. The solitude will have changed your presence in ways you may not fully see, but others will feel it. Here is something rarely taught. There are people meant to walk alone for important parts of their journey. Not forever, not completely, but deeply. They are not damaged. They are not lacking. They are simply designed for different conditions, the way some animals survive in freezing climates that would kill others, the way certain plants grow in deserts where forest trees would die. Your nature may be different. Your wiring may not match the endlessly social model celebrated everywhere. No amount of forcing yourself into that mold will change your inner design. Schopenhauer wrote that ordinary people think about how to spend their time, while a person of intellect tries to use it. Perhaps you are not lonely. Perhaps you are simply using your time in a way others cannot tolerate. This does not mean isolation is always healthy. There is fearful withdrawal, hiding because of rejection or pain. Machiavelli warned against that weakness. But there is also sovereign solitude, the deliberate choice of someone who has work to complete that the crowd would interrupt. The honest question is, which one describes you? If you are hiding from life because of fear, that is a wound to heal. But if you are alone because you discovered something powerful in that solitude that cannot be found in company, then you are not broken. You are awakening. The world may tell you that you are wrong. It will say connection is everything and isolation is death. It will label your preference and try to medicate your silence. Ignore that voice. It does not understand what you are building inside. It cannot see the forge shaping your character. It speaks from its own fear of quiet, a fear you are learning to master. So where does this leave you? You are alone. Maybe right now. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Instead of seeing that aloneness as a problem to escape, you can now view it as territory to explore, a laboratory for growth, a forge to shape yourself. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. Solitude is removing everything false, the fake identities, the performed personalities, the borrowed beliefs. All of it is burning away in the fire of isolation. What remains is real. From that reality, you will build something that does not depend on approval, something steady, something that cannot be shaken by rejection or abandonment, something truly yours. Machiavelli did not write The Prince to be liked. He wrote it to speak truth. That truth, sharp and lasting, survived every ruler of his time. Your solitude can create something similar, maybe not a famous book, but a powerful self. A self so integrated, so clear, so carefully built that it does not bend with every social wind. That is the gift hidden inside your loneliness. Accept it. There is more depth to this than can be spoken here. If these words felt familiar, as if they echoed something you already sensed, understand that this is only the surface. There are deeper layers of psychology and strategy that cannot always be shared openly. If you are still here, you are different from those who clicked away. Carry this thought with you. The next time you are truly alone and that familiar ache starts to rise, pause. Ask yourself, what if this is not my sentence but my training? The crowd cannot hear what silence is teaching you, but you can.